Hello, everyone. My name is Carla, and I'm going to be doing a presentation on an article titled Psychophysiological Reactivity to Abuse-Related Stimuli in Sexually Revictimized Women. I think this is an important article for me personally because I have a passion and a desire to help women who have had trauma in their lives. And it's also important in general for therapists or people who are working with sexual assault survivors to really be able to understand how their nervous system is reactive and how it responds to threats, and that can help inform treatment. So to start with, we're just going to go over a few biopsych terms and then look into some previous research. So psychophysiological, psyche is referring to the mind, and physio is referring to the body. So psychophysiological is referring to how the mind is affecting the body. So what's going on in the mind affects how the body is responding, and that can be measured through heart rate variability. The autonomic nervous system includes both the sympathetic nervous system as well as the parasympathetic nervous system. So when you have a threat, your sympathetic nervous system gets activated and you start getting aroused and go into a fight or flight mode. And then the parasympathetic nervous system helps to calm you down and brings you back into homeostasis. So what we found in previous research is that almost a third of women have reported being assaulted in childhood. And over a half of college-aged women report sexual assault in adulthood. And 3/4 of women who were sexually assaulted in childhood have also had sexual assault in adulthood. So they were re-victimized. And there's been some inconsistent findings with how these victimized women react and respond to threats. So that's what this study is going to look further into. So we're going to look into the method and the hypothesis. So for the participants, there were 123 college-aged women who were divided into 4 groups. These groups were whether or not they had experienced sexual assault, and whether that was just in childhood or just in adulthood, or if they experienced both childhood sexual assault and adulthood sexual assault. That was the re-victimized group. One of the main measures that was used for this study was called an emotional Stroop paradigm task. So different words would pop up on a screen, and there were 4 different categories. So one of these categories was just a control, which was just 5 X's. Another category was a neutral, and it showed fruit words like apple or banana. Another category was a general threat category, which could be something like a bear or fire, things like that. And then the last category was the sexual revictimization category. And these were words that were related to the sexual assault that could be very triggering for these victims. The emotional Stroop paradigm task had these words pop up on the screen in different colors. So it could be red, blue, green, or yellow. And these words and the colors were all randomized. And what the women had to do was press a key responding to the correct color of the word that popped up. And throughout this task, they were measuring the physiological measures through the heart rate variability, as well as the speed of their reaction time, of how quickly they responded to each colored word. So they started off with the different surveys to determine really which group each woman belonged into, whether they were in the childhood sexual assault group, the adulthood sexual assault group, the re-victimized group, or no victimization group. Once they were in the lab, they started off with a baseline video, which really just measured where they're at their baseline, what their normal measures are like. And then they moved into the emotional Stroop paradigm task. And throughout this whole process, the IBIs, which are the inner beat intervals, recorded throughout, and that was measuring their heart rate variability. So what they hypothesized is that the childhood sexual assault victims would have the highest psychophysiological reactivity, and that would be indicative of a protective response to the abuse-related stimuli. And they predicted that the revictimized group would have a lower psychophysiological reactivity, and that would be indicative of a blunted response to abuse-related stimuli. They also hypothesized that the childhood sexual assault victims would have the fastest reaction time, and the revictimized group would have the slowest reaction time of how quickly they pressed the correct key for the emotional Stroop paradigm task. So we're going to look into the results and whether or not the hypothesis was supported. The results showed that the childhood sexual assault victims had heightened sympathetic activation at both baseline and task, and the revictimized group had a decrease in parasympathetic and sympathetic activation from the baseline to the task. As far as the reaction time, there were differences among each category of words, whether it was a low threat or the sexual victimization threat word or just a neutral word. So as the threat became more salient or more threatening, all of the groups had slower reaction times, but the groups themselves did not have any difference between each group. So was the hypothesis supported or not? As far as their first hypothesis, which was about the psychophysiological reactivity, that was supported. So the sexual assault victims did have the highest psychophysiological reactivity, and the revictimized victims did have lower psychophysiological reactivity. But when it comes to the actual reaction time of how quickly they responded to these words, that was not supporting their hypothesis. They all had equal reaction times between the groups. So we're going to look into what does this mean and future research. So what does this mean? To sum everything up here, what we found is that the childhood sexual assault victims had heightened sympathetic responses, and that's indicative that they are protecting themselves from future threats, and that's an adaptive response. The revictimized group had diminished sympathetic response, but there was still no difference in reaction time. So they're still able to respond to threats, even though they're not as highly activated in their nervous system as the childhood sexual assault group. So we're not sure exactly what that means. Could that be an adaptive response? That's something that still needs more research to really figure out. So for future studies, we can look into some more mediating and moderating factors that might help explain some of these findings of why revictimized group has diminished sympathetic responses. We can also look into using some different psychophysiological measures other than just the heart rate variability. And as well, we can also try to have a more diversity in the sample of participants that were used for the study so that these results can be generalized to a larger group. And that is all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.